Okay, so we're doing a Siman Tet, and even though it's really Tet is a huge topic, we went through it actually kind of quickly, even though it was 3 weeks. Tet starts off with a kind of bizarre halacha, I think, which is that the bones of the Issur can mevatel the Issur, can help to mevatel the Issur. It's a very strange law, and if you just try to think about it, it doesn't, if you just think about it on your own, it's like strange. You don't understand why they would say such a thing. So that's why I gave you all of those sources. I gave you like where the Yerushalmis, I gave you like they're basically the same. I highlighted. Is that helpful? I highlighted that actually. It took me some time to figure out exactly what is being repeated and what's not. But it's important, and also especially in the Rosh, I showed you where he's quoting, where he's not quoting. So somebody who, first of all, but it all starts really with a Gemara Bavli, and that is on Sadi Het, where we did in the summer, we discussed it a little bit. Sadi Het, it talks about the limud of 60 or 100 from the pasuk about the Zroa B'Sheila. Now, let me just, by way of introduction, is the law of 60, I've been harping that the law of 60 is really a rabbinic law, really midoraita, it's ti'ima, and 60 is just a stand-in for that law. So how can I say that if we're having a limud from a pasuk? Maybe 60 is a Torah law. So what's your quick first response? I lost all of you. My internet died. There. Okay. Now I see you. Noam, what do you say? Why is my internet?
What I said was asmachta ba'almahi.
Exactly. So in other words, it's not a legitimate limud. Essentially, it's not a Torah limud. It's just to hint at it, and there's very good proofs for that. Can you tell me what good proof for it? I don't know. My internet is not good. Yeah, I don't see you guys. Not much I can do about that. Maybe somebody wants to type something. I see a chat here. Lexi wants to say something, but I don't hear you. No? You don't want to say anything? Noam, you want to say something?
Yeah. The pasuk is talking about a min b'mino case, and we anyway say do'aita min b'mino as well.
Right, that's pretty clear. The case is actually min b'mino. So for sure, like how can you learn min b'eno mino? So okay, and there's another indication also. Any other ideas of why it can't be? I saw someone say this a while ago. I read someone say this a while ago. That is that it says, he says like this just proves that it's batel in 60, but maybe it's also batel in 50. This is just a case where it happens to be exactly 60 to 1, and then it's batel, but maybe it's also batel in 40 to 1. If you're saying that is the ratio, if you're saying that empirically we're measuring the meat and the bones, then that's just the case the Torah chose, but maybe that's just a case, but that doesn't mean it aren't other cases that are different ratios that would be mutter. So fine, so it's for sure an asma. So what does the Gemara say? So can somebody tell me how from that Gemara we have any idea that what is our statement about bones? What do we learn about bones from that Gemara? There's a machloket between 60 and 100. And what's the basis of that machloket? As I recall, it is if you say 100, then you say you don't count the bones. You just do meat against meat. And on the arm, there's very little meat. So it's very stringy kind of thing, and therefore the ratio becomes 1 to 100. But if you count it with the bones, then all of a sudden the arm has a lot of bones, and the ratio will be 60. So essentially the machloket there in the Gemara. Hello, welcome, Rabbi Landis. So the machloket is whether or not to count the bones. So what can anybody give me a conclusion from that Gemara, from the Gemara in Chulin Tzadichet? As far as what is the machloket about the bones? In other words, you have to say like.
I mean, it's like whether we count the bones as part of the status of the meat that it's with seems to be the thing, right? Like there's no idea in this Gemara that like you could count heter bones but not Issur bones, or that Issur, certainly no idea that like Issur bones could count towards mevateling the Issur.
Oh,
right?
wait, work it out slowly. Wait, I want you to work it out slowly. Work it out slowly. According to the one who says, let's say I think you're starting to talk about 60, he says you count bones against bones. So,
yes,
so what is
he says that like he seems to think
language
that bones have like the status of the thing that they are, the meat that they are surrounded by.
So put it in the words of the Shulchan Aruch. How would you write it if you were writing the halacha according to him, the way the Shulchan Aruch writes it? In other words, Issur bones, mitzdarfin, use those words.
Mitzdarfin l'Issur, and like like heter bones mitzdarfin l'heter.
Right, exactly. You would say, according to the 60 opinion, you would say Issur bones mitzdarfin l'Issur and heter bones mitzdarfin l'heter.
Could we have a comment on just the word mitzdarfin? That seems to be the word.
Yeah, mitzdarfin. Anyone want to translate that?
Like to
Lexi,
create a certain shear.
Right, joins together to create a certain shear. So are the bones sort of neutral, or do they? So what were they? Wait. So we said by 60, we're saying that Issur bones joined with the Issur and the heter bones joined with the heter, which seems to say that the bones are they food or not food? They're food.
They're food.
What would the 100 opinion say?
The bones are negligible. We don't count them at all. It's just,
and why would that
meat
be?
against meat, because bones aren't food. They have no ability to mevatel something.
Right. So
either leheter or l'Issur.
Right. They have no ability to. They don't make matters worse. They don't help us. They don't. So they're not like. They don't. They're not like food, which participates in the creation of Issur or heter, or they don't act as a bottling agent, and they don't act as a ussering agent.
They don't give flavor.
They don't give flavor, and therefore they don't. So therefore they're so. So is there? But there's no opinion in this Gemara that heter bones or Issur bones would mitzdaref with the heter. No opinion like that in the Gemara in Chulin. Again, we're in Chulin Tzadichet. No opinion in that Gemara that would say that the Issur bones join with the heter. And there's furthermore no opinion that says the Issur bones are ignored. There's also an opinion in the halacha we're gonna see later that maybe you just ignore the Issur bones, but the heter bones join with the heter. We also don't see that. We either say we're all in or we're all out. Either the bones join with the Issur and the heter, or the bones don't join with the Issur or the heter. So where do we get this idea from? The halacha is not like this. We seem to have the halacha is not like the halacha is going to be different from this. I mean, we haven't seen the halacha together, but what's the other source that you guys saw that says differently?
Well, the one in the Yerushalmi implies that like the klipin and stuff like that, I don't use different words, like that everyone like in those sources agrees that the heter ones count to mevatel the Issur, and the disagreement is like, or the question is whether the Issur ones also count to mevatel the Issur, and we end up saying yes. So like that's an opinion we didn't get at all in the bobli.
Exactly. So the Yerushalmi, everybody seems to agree that the heter bones join to bitul, and the Issur bones maybe also. Let's look at it together quickly. I will post. Let's see. I think I have it here. Oh no, I turned it. I lost it. Wait, just Give me a second. Let's do share screen. And here you have my screen. And we talked about this Gemara in the Bavli. Discuss that. This Tosot we'll see later. This first source is where the idea is first brought up. But let's go to the here. Yeah, let's look at this one. The Gemara appears in Mesechет Orla and the Talmud Yerushalmi in Mesechet Nizir, and let's just. Well, this sugya is similar to our sugya in the Bavli. I'll read the green, and then maybe Lexi will read the blue. My kadon ahen amar notnei tamin echad mimeya v'ahen amar notnei tami echad mishishim. So, without translating it every word, one says things that give flavor require 60, and the other says things that give flavor require 100 to mevatel, either 60 or 100. V'shneihen lemedinan mi'ayel nazir. Oh, this is just like our Gemara in Bavli. Man da'amar notnei tam echad mimeya at osei et hazroa at osei et hazroa ve'echad mimeya la'ayel. Uman da'amar notnei tam echad mishishim at osei et hazroa echad mishishim. I'm not going to translate. La'ayel man da'amar notnei tam echad mimeya at motzi. So here's the part that we want. Man da'amar notnei tam echad mimeya. The one that says it's 100. It's 100. At motzi et hazroa atzamot. Uman da'amar notnei tam echad mishishim ein at motzia et hazroa min ha'atzamot. So wait a second. What does that mean? Let's do the second one. The man da'amar notnei tam echad mishishim ein at motzia et hazroa min ha'atzamot. In other words, you don't take out. Well, what does this mean? You don't take out the zroa from the bones. In other words, you leave the bones with the zroa when you count it.
It sounds like they're saying the two answers are the same. It's just how do you do the math is different. If you're going to say it's echad b'shishim, then you have to do echad b'shishim with the bones. And if you're going to say echad without the bones, if you're going to say echad b'meya, then you do it with the bones. But it's the math.
Isn't that backwards? Isn't that backwards from what we said? Isn't that backwards? In other words, you're saying echad b'meya.
I mean, this is just the same as we saw in the Bavli.
Is it? Explain to me how it's the same. I mean, maybe you're right.
It's just, again, saying that we have like these derivations of shirim coming from the El Hanazir. We have shishim and me'ah, and that like the shishim is coming from people who like eno matzi et tezra, like whatever, that like they don't exclude the bone from the counting, and the ones who get me'ah do exclude the bones from counting.
Okay, but ukeshem, and the key line here is ukeshem shat motzi et hatzamot min hazroa kach at motzi min ha'ayel. So in other words, the one that says shishim, you take out No,
the one you include the bones,
Like,
right?
he's saying
That's
for
what it
one
should be.
reason,
The
he's saying
shishim should be
the
include.
bones. Yeah, like
So you
ein
do.
motzi. You don't like. I was saying it as like motzi, as in like you don't like exclude the zroa like from the atzamot, like you combine them together.
Yeah, I that's how I read it too. Is that it's einat motzi, right? That you do not take the zroa from the atzamot. In other words, that the two are the both negative or positive substances. Depending on
And I think maybe your confusion was with the fact that like the second half of the statement is positive, but I read that as just being a klal that's being applied to both cases. That it's like in either cases, like if you're like motzi at hazroa, then you do that with the aisle, and if you aren't, then you aren't with the rest of it.
Oh, I actually read that line different. I actually read that line differently. I read ukashem she'at motzi at atzamot min hazroa kach at motzi min ha'ayil as a challenge to the 100 opinion. That wait a minute, you can't say, because the only way you get to the 100 ratio is if you take the bones of only the zroa, but you leave the bones of the rest of the aisle. So this is saying, wait a minute, if you're going to take the bones from the zroa, you also have to take the bones from the aisle, which would be because that won't get you to 100. That proportion would be way less.
I think it's because of the breita. I think it's because of the breita, not because of the
No, I think I sort of go with Noam. I think I like what Noam is saying. That this is a kasha. So what was the opinion up till now? The opinion up till now was different from the bavli. That means the opinion was that you were removing the bones just from where?
Just from the zroa, but you leave the ones in the aisle in, or at least that's the assumption of the kasha.
In other words, in order to get a ratio of
the reason
1 to 100 was that you took out the bones of the zroa and you kept the whole aisle with its bones.
But aren't like the fact that it's followed by ditani makes it feel like that. If that's the kasha, then I don't really feel like ditani is not usually something that's coming.
It says late yachol. It says late yachil. You can't say that. And I think the Rosh adds a word. He adds the word amar, but late. It's late yachil. You can't say that. Why? Ditanya.
So you're reading that in line as this being answered because in this one from the other source we see the idea of the heter bones being combining with the heter to mistaref.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, wait. So read the blue here, Lexi. Read the blue. Or you know what? I'll change my mind. Let's go back. Let's see it here with the Rosh's explanation. Here, first of all, the Rosh says klomar. He's explaining this Gemara that we just saw. Klomar. The Einan Misayan Levatel Azroa. What is Einan Misayan? Kashem Sha'at Motzi et Motzi'an, in other words, the bones from the Zroa, Kachat Motzi'an Min Ha'ayil. Klomar ve'Einan, the bones are not Misayan Levatel Hazroa, which is the Issur. Nimsa Batil B'Pachot Mimeya. So this is a kasha on the opinion that it's meya, because the ratio is now, in other words, you can't count the bones of the rest of the aisle. You've got to say meat versus meat. That's what he's saying. Now, the first opinion was trying to say, why is it 100 versus meya? Because I'm going to count just the meat of the arm versus the whole aisle. And he says, and then the Gemara says, but kashem sha'at motzi et min hazroa kachat motzi min ha'ayil. You should be consistent. You should remove from both places the same way. And therefore, if you do that, klomar ve'enan misayin levatel, they don't help levatel. Nimsa comes out, batil b'vechot mimeya. You're not going to have the ratio of 1 to meya because you're just going to have the meat of the arm, you're gonna have the meat of the arm versus the meat of the rest of the aisle, and that might be it might be less than 100. It might be less than 100. Is that any?
When you're saying less, you mean as in it would have to be a number larger than Mea, right?
No, I'm saying I'm saying the only way you're
because
gonna get,
if you, as in they're saying like you pachot memea, as in like if.
No, we're not going to prove.
You're kidding.
You're
Sorry.
trying to prove.
Wait, no. So they're saying that the kasha is that they're only getting Mea if they exclude the bones from the rest of the aisle as well, and they say that's impossible because of this other source that we have.
No. The opposite. In other words, we're trying to prove that the requirement is 100, and we're going to say that in this case, the actual metziut, the actual circumstance is 100. Why? Because the meat of the arm, of the leg, versus the bones and the meat of the rest of the animal is a ratio of 100 to 1. But if you're going to tell me that I have to if you have to remove both the bones from both sides, then the physical example of the Torah is not a case of 100 versus 1. It's a case of meat versus meat. So it's like 100 versus, 80 or some other number. So I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to have a source for what I'm trying to prove, which is I need 101.
Rav Nachum?
Yeah.
If I just, it's similar to what you're saying. I just want to put it in, and it's kind of what Noam's writing a little bit too. Like the idea is the only way you could get a ratio between the leg and the zroa, and we'll call it the leg, and the rest of the animal being 1 in 100 or 1 in something greater than 100 is if it's only the meat of the zroa against the meat plus some amount of the bones in the animal itself, or maybe even the bones of the zroa. I'm not exactly sure how they're going to add it up, but in other words, you need some bones to fight off the zroa in order to get a 1 in 100 ratio.
But if you throw in the bones of the zroa, then what?
I think that's the thing, is like you have to, right now we're doing the case where you don't have any bones, right? You just have meat against meat. And then
we're sure not going to have, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so now we're saying, so you have to add some bones in somewhere, I'm assuming, right? Where we are at Yurushalmi, in order to get yourself to 100. So.
Wait, so then how do we read this next part? Late at yachol, you're not able to say that. Is that agreed upon? Late at yachol, yeah. Tanya, as it says, Ein tinofet shel truma mitzarefet ima truma the Issur at Chulin. The tinofet is like the bad parts, or so what is the bad parts of truma? Like maybe the klipa, the peel of the wheat. Is shel truma ina mitzarefet ima truma the Issur at Chulin. So in other words, we don't use the Issur peel of the wheat kernels because they're not really us. They're not really food. I'm adding. They're not really food. Aval tinofet shel chulin, but the non-food elements of the chulin, the klipa, all do mitzaref im chulin la lota tatruma. The kosher ones join with the kosher food to mevatel the truma. So here we see that we could have a kind of inconsistent attitude towards non-food particles, towards the tinofet. So wait a second. How does that structurally work, Noam?
That's the answer.
Yeah. Can you meaning? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
So
no,
So what is late dat yachol? That's the end of the question.
That is the beginning of the teirus.
Yeah, late, right?
Late yachol. No, you're not allowed to say that.
Oh, I'm reading it differently than you are, Noam. I'm reading it. You can do it because you can be motzi one, not the other.
Okay. I think either way it comes out structurally the same, right? Structurally, you're both saying that this is the explanation of why what we said above in the green was correct, right? We're diffusing the kasha. When we said that not the green, but the first part of it, where we said that you remove bones from one and don't remove bones from the other, that is correct because of this. Now, first of all, I have a difficulty with this because, I mean, is the idea of truma, is it have to do with tam? You know, again, it's like almost a different thing. It's like the whole requirement of 100 for truma is a rabbinic law to, you know, so maybe they were being makel here. Like, it's like almost like they're comparing things that shouldn't be compared. But maybe that does make sense because anyway, maybe this is min b'minna with the zroa, and it's also batel barov, really. So maybe, but still, it could be like different gezeras. It's like not a great comparison, I think. But let's see. Let's see what the Rosh says. The Rosh says, "V'ken hachanami mitzaref atzamot shel ha'ayil, just the ayil, levatel et hazroa." So too, in our case, the atzamot of the ayil, the heter, can help us mevatel, and we'll ignore the bones of the Issur. Yeah. So we're getting this uneven relationship, and then it goes on. Rev Bibi. Yes.
We might have had a havamina. It's food-like.
What's food-like?
Until we say we're not counting it. We're not sure if it doesn't count in some way.
Which? The bones?
Not the bones, the truma, for example.
You're saying the bones. You're saying it is a good comparison because the peel of the meat is not food, and the bones are not food, and they're food, and they're both food-like. They're both associated with the food.
Yeah, we're not gonna say they're actual food.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna make a decision.
But we're gonna get a kind of inconsistent setup going here, which is that the heter, I mean, that we have this statement, the Tanya. This statement here is like the source for this inconsistent attitude towards this semi-food substances, where we're going to treat the Issur. It's not mitzaref, but the heter is. The ken hachanami mitzaref. All right, so we read that. Rav Bibi boy tinofet shel truma mahu sheyitzaref imachulin. So now he says, well, wait a second. Tinofet shel truma. In other words, in our case, that would be the Issur. What about the klipa of the truma? Shouldn't it mahu shitzaref imachulin? Maybe the Issur should join with the heter and help us because it's not food. That peel, maybe it's not truma. If it doesn't count, how can it be neutral? It's either good or bad. We have a black and white world here. So let it join with the chulin. Lahalot et truma, to mevatel the truma. So now we're going to try to resolve that question. Min ma da amar Rav Huna, from what Rav Huna said, klipe Issur mitzaref leheter. He said, mitzarfot leheter. Wait. Mimad Amar Rav Huna. Where is Rav Huna?
He hasn't been cited yet. He hasn't been cited. They're just bringing him in now. Yeah.
So what did Rav Huna say? Rav Huna said, "Klipe Issur, the peels of Issur mitzarfot leheter. They join up with the heter. So that sounds great. They do join up with the heter. Hada Amra." Tinofet shel truma. I guess you would say tinofet shel truma mitzarefet imachulin la lot the truma. So yeah, the truma should work. And by the way, actually, you think about it, like Rav Huna is talking about Issur mitzaref leheter, and so where there is a comparison, the Gemara itself is saying that this is truma and Issur are comparable. And in fact, the original statement of Rav Huna is by Issur. So I guess our halacha makes a lot of sense that the klipe Issur mitzaref leheter. So to the bones of Issur mitzarfot leheter. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I still, I didn't read this as well as I would have liked to. It's a difficult piece, but we don't need to get it 100% clear. We got the basic idea here. And let's wait.
Nachum, what are you worried about?
No, I'd like to. If I had that time, I would want to go back and read it again and try to. I didn't look. The problem is, I had it clear a week ago, but it's hard to get it. What? No, just exactly what this Shakavatariya is. Exactly. I guess the opinion, is to see it in the words that the 60 is saying. What is the 60 saying? We got very clear the 100. That the 100 is the bones of the heter and the meat of the heter versus the meat of the Issur. But what was the 60 opinion? We didn't fully flesh that out in the green part here. Echad mishishim at oseh et hazroa, echad mishishim la'ayil. I guess that's it. He counts both. He counts the zroa with its bones. I mean, I'm not sure. With its bones versus the ayil with its bones, and that's 1 in 60. Yeah, I guess that's it. That's it. So the first opinion that 60 is saying you count the bones together with either side, like normal. Our first logic would dictate to us. So this is, now let's look at the Rosh here. The Rosh quotes, notice I put it in quotes for you. I fixed up this Rosh a lot. I put it in quotes to show you that this is a quote from the Gemara in Khulin, Tzadichet. So that's the Gemara that we discussed at the beginning of Shir. And then he brings the Yushalmi. So now let's go to the Rosh's difficulty. Somebody want to read? Should I? Yavni? All right, go ahead, Yavni.
I can try.
Read it with drama.
Looks like this is volunteering.
Who's volunteering?
Never mind. ותימא לי כיוון דתינופת של תרומה מצטרפין עם החולין להעלות את התרומה, המאי קטני בברייתא, אין תינופת של תרומה מצטרפת עם התרומה, לאסור את החולין, לאשמועינן רבותא תפי דמצטרפין עם החולין, להעלות התרומה.
Wait. So, I mean, he's bothered by he doesn't like this conclusion of this Gemara. That ain't, the conclusion of this Gemara is ain't hachanami. It's mitzaref on one side and not mitzaref on the other side, because he thinks that lashon doesn't fit well with the original statement. Rav Bibi said, no, not Rav Bibi, here, Tanya. Ein tinofet shel truma mitzaref ein tinofet shel truma mitzaref ima truma le'asor et hachulin. Fine. It doesn't join. But what are we saying now by the conclusion? By the conclusion, we said it actually is mitzaref to the heter. So why did the Breita write it like this? The Breita should have written, instead of writing, tell me a bigger Kiddush. Don't tell me, ein tinofet shel truma mitzarefet. Tell me, tinofet shel, don't get rid of the word ein and say, tinofet shel truma mitzarefet ima chulin. That's right. That's the conclusion. Tinofet shel truma mitzarefet ima chulin. Why do you say it doesn't join to make Issur? Tell me a bigger Kiddush. Not only does it not join with the Issur, it joins with the heter. So that's what he says with Tema. Kevan the tinofet shel truma, like we concluded at the end, mitzarefet ima chulin, la'alot et the truma. Amai katani b'Breita. Why does it say in the Breita? Ein tinofet shel truma mitzarefet ima truma le'asor et the chulin. Why did it just say that? Lashminan rebuta. So lashminan is not an answer. Lashminan is let it tell us a bigger kiddush. Rebuta. Lashminan rebuta. Tfei, a bigger one. Dimitztaref im hachulin, that the Issur tinofet joins the chulin la'alot l'truma. So, I mean, the Rosh is asking a very strong kasha on the Gemara, actually, right? He's saying the conclusion of this Gemara doesn't fit the Breita. All right, so go on, Yavni.
אלא ודאי מתוך הברייתא משמע דאין התינופת של תרומה מצטרפת לא לאסור ולא להתיר. וברייתא...
That's it. He basically says the Yushalmi is wrong. The Yushalmi is wrong, right? The Breita says what it says. It says it doesn't join, means it's neutral. I mean, are you guys as excited as I am about this? Because that's like, he's just saying the Gemara is wrong. That's what he's saying.
Right.
It's just the Yirushalmi, it's fine.
Yeah, okay.
It's right.
So he's saying it's wrong, and the Bryce is really saying it's neutral. Okay. But then that's also kind of weird. It's still weird because it's not saying why is it neutral? Why isn't it joining with the Issur? But it's okay. But Ken, go on.
לכן מדקתני, אבל תינופת של חולין מצטרפים עם החולין וכולי, משמע דווקא של חולין, אבל לא של תרומה.
Right. So there, he's not even particularly, at this point at least, interested in a teretz. Maybe we'll see if he gives a teretz. But he's basically saying it doesn't, the Gemara doesn't know how to learn a Breita. And it's pretty convincing. But then we do have this statement. The problem is, what's the problem on the Rosh is that we have this statement of Rav Huna. Klipe Issur mitzaref heter. Pretty clear statement of Rav Huna that you can have your cake and eat it too. In other words, that the klipa of the Issur actually can join the heter. So is Rav Huna arguing on the Mishnah? In other words,
on the Breita, yeah.
On the Breita? Maybe he is, or maybe that understanding is right. I'm just saying the Rosh is not relating to Rav Huna's statement. Like, who cares? We can erase this and still have that statement of Rav Huna and say that's the halacha.
Right.
Okay, so now he's going to quote Rabbeinu Shimshon, who is one of the Balei Tosafot. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah.
וכתב רבנו שמשון ז"ל בפירוש המשניות תרומות, פרק ה' דלפי הירושלמי, עצם הזרוע נמי מצטרף עם, דלפי הירושלמי, עצם הזרוע נמי מצטרף עם העיל, לבטל בשר הזרוע, וליקה אלא 100 בין הכל. ופליג הסוגיה
Yeah, okay. Well, wait. So he says that according to the Yushalmi, the etzem of the zroa, which is Issur, is mitzaref ima ayil levatel basar azroa. And then what does he mean here? Beleka elamea bein hakol. And it works out that comes out to 100. But we're counting the Issur bone with the heter,
which is a little odd because before we were totally convinced that the 1 in 100 depended on it being exactly the meat of the zroa against the meat plus the bones of the ayah Right.
I guess that's what Joel was saying, where he was politely saying that we don't know exactly the ratio. Maybe Noam also was saying that. We don't know exactly the ratio, but it's certainly some bones need to be added. And Rav Shimshon is saying, the conclusion of the Yushalmi is all the bones are added. That is the conclusion of the Yushalmi, that all the bones are added to the heter. Okay. Upalig. And here's a key part. Upalig, go on.
Upalig asugya, the hacha, the mashmada. Sorry?
So it argues on our, what does the hacha mean?
It's our sugya in Bavli.
Yeah. Our sugya in Tzadichet. He's commenting on Tzadichet. Then the Yirushalmi is arguing on the Bavli.
Right. דמשמע דאפילו עצמות דהתר אין מצטרפין למאן דאמר ב100 דקאמר בשר לבהדי בשר משערינן, ולא כאמר בהדי בשר ועצמות.
Right. In other words, we learned simply that according to the opinion that it's 1 in 100, you say you take out the bones from both, and there's very little meat on that zroa, and so it comes to the ratio of 100 to 1, and so it's different. I mean, not only is it an argument in halacha, maybe it's argument in mitziyut, right? It's an argument in what the ratios are of meat in an animal.
Yeah. בשם העדי דנקת בשר בזרוע נקת נמי בשר בעיל ולאו דווקא.
Oh wait, here's an answer. What does it say?
And so you might say that here where it says basar bezroa, that we assumed that in the Bavli it was saying when it said that we were including it. We read it as saying that we were including or throwing out the bones from both of them, but maybe that's not the case. Like,
right,
that
even
was
though
our
it says
simple reading of the Bavli, but maybe.
Right, he's sort of like touching up. He's changing the Bavli and saying when the Bavli said basar, the basar against the basar, I meant the basar against the basar and the bones.
Right.
It just said the word basar, but it was lav dafka.
But it seems so not intuitive in the sense of like when you're making a distinction of literally what things are counted and what things are not counted, and the exact shearing and the things that you're measuring is what matters. To be lav dafka seems like a little absurd.
Yes, yes. That's why he says shema. That's why he says maybe. He's sort of like he's throwing out like a possibility, but he doesn't, because otherwise we have like the exact same sugya basically, and totally different conclusions. We want to. You're right, but you're right. It doesn't really. We've seen a similar thing to this. If in the sugya of with Rava and minba minno Yoreh Rabbanan, in one of the terutzim there was that when Rava said there was a place there at Rava where we tried to explain that Rava said when he said it's in Kodshim, he really meant Kodshim and Chulin. And he just said Kodshim because the previous discussion was about Kodshim. But he also meant Chulin. So Tosfotim and the Rosh can sometimes do things like that. And it's all right, it's uncomfortable. Mihu. So here, Lexi, why don't you read from Mihu?
Mihu anan kaimalan command amar b'shishim uledide ka'amar basar v'atzamot v'hade basar v'atzamot misharinan almad atzamot mitzdarfin la'asor lahatir. It's like the way we actually paskin is we paskin like the one who says shishim, who makes it explicit that they're like measuring with the basar and the atzamot in both ends, which would seem to imply that we count the atzamot for both things.
And this whole discussion that we've had up till now for the past 40 minutes has been about something that is the 1 in 100, which is completely not the halacha. So who cares? This is only according to those opinions that say you need 100 versus 1 and not 60. So I think it's just a great point. You say, guys, you've gotten so detailed into the details, you've forgotten the forest here. The forest is that this is not the halacha. The halacha goes by 60. Of course, it's kind of an irrelevant point because either way, we have this statement of Rav Huna again. Rav Huna says, "Klipa Issur mitzvah for the heter." We still have that statement. We still sort of have to explain that. You can say that statement is only according to that opinion of 1 in 100. I don't know. All right, but let's go on. Go on, Lex.
Okay. ואמר נמי ירושלמי, מה דאמר נתמה בשישים, אין אתה מוציא עצמות מן הזרוע. משא ומתן של ירושלמי, דתינוף התרומה, אליבא דמן דאמר במאה. So right, he like puts all of that like within the mea category, and that's not applicable to the shishim like paradigm.
It's like you say, it's all irrelevant. I don't care. Achmir nishkein chinik. It's not. It's a nice conversation, but it's not our halacha. Mihu.
Mihu, מסכת תרומות בפרק בצל, אמר בירושלמי, דבייצה בשישים, ומסיק עלי רבי חנינא, הירק והקליפה והמים מצטרפים.
All right, so first of
So
all,
we have
this
idea
relates.
that a beta is
Yeah, go
batel
ahead.
b'shishim, and we get told that basically everything around it
Masikala,
and
which
the
include-
outside of it, including the shell, all combine to batel the contents of it.
By the way, this goes back to Shir yesterday, or yet last week with Joel. We were talking about eggs. Look, this Yushalmi makes a lot more sense, right? This just as a derech agav, it says that hayerek va'klipa va'mayim mitztarfim. In other words, the peels, we're peels and the water. You're boiling the eggs in water. Where I think Joel asked, why are we saying you need 61 eggs? What about the water that you cooked it in? So this says, yeah, of course you count the water. Of course mitztarfim, and even the klipa, because the klipa is not Issur. But Amar, go ahead. But Amar. He's going to even more.
אמר
more
רבי
sensitive.
זרע, איסורו מתוכו, כלומר דאין משארים ביצה האסורה, אלא לפי האוכל שבתוך הקליפה. He's like,
Exactly.
the Issur is the consumable stuff inside of the like,
Anybody
shell,
who's
so you
boiled a
don't have
hard-boiled
the
egg knows that there's an air pocket. The volume of the egg, there's a little air inside the egg for the chick to breathe when it first breathes, and there's a little bit of air in there, or for whatever reasons. So the volume of the inside of the egg is less than the volume of the egg. So we only go by the Issur, but we don't count the air, and we do count the klipa on the other side as heter, even if it's an Issur chicken. Okay, so what do we see from this, though? That we see that
This would seem to imply what we saw in the Yerushalmi, the idea that like the non-directly food things around Issur not only aren't counted with the Issur, but dafka combine with the heter to mevatel the Issur.
Oh, right. Although that's exactly what he's trying to say, but on the other hand, does it actually say that? Does it actually say that what's the status of the, I mean, doesn't say that the klipa of the Issur joins with the heter. Doesn't say that anywhere. It just said.
But it says mitzarfim.
Klipa, the klipa could mean, what does klipa mean? Klipa, you think klipa means the egg of the actual egg of the Issur. And if you have one egg in your pot, you can, I understand. I was thinking there's many eggs there. You're saying, what if there's just one egg and the klipa is the klipa of that Issur egg? It'll also join. Okay. But I was thinking the klipa of the other eggs, but you're right. The klipa of that very egg will mitzaref. So that's another Yerushalmi, and that one has nothing to do with 100. Therefore, we can't write it off as irrelevant. It's not. That would be presumably our opinion too, and that's where Rav Huna said his statement.
Right. So Rav Huna amar klipe Issur malim et heter, klamar she'af beklipa shel beitza ha'asura. So we make it explicit now. We're just saying the idea that like even the klipa of the Issur egg should be able to mevatel the contents of the egg.
I continue.
And so that seems to present a problem for us because we can't just write this off like we did with the mea. יש לחלק בין עצמות לקליפין, ויש בעצמות לחלוכית וטעם יותר ממה שיש בקליפי ביצים. Like, to resolve this, I can say that there's a distinction, even though neither of these are mamish ochel, there's a distinction between the klipim, the shells of the eggs, and between atzamot. But like klipim are like mamish, like not food, not moist, not imparting flavor in any sense. Whereas like bones have some measure of like moisture and some amount of like capacity to impart flavor.
Excellent. So right. So he's saying the bones are really a little bit food. He's saying like that. He's basically saying bones really are a little bit food. They have time. They're food. And the klipa is not food. Okay, continue.
ואף על פי כן, לא מסתבר כלל, דהגיד הנשא, למען דאמר אם בגידים בנותן טעם, אם נתבשל עם הירח מותר. ומי עדיפה עצמות לאסור יותר מגיד? So he raises a very fair kushya, which is that we have this idea in the Gemara that like somebody presents the concept that like the gid, the tendon isn't really a noten tam. It's this whatever. It's like wiry ghee, doesn't have a lot of fat. It's not flavorful. But he's like, are you trying to tell me that like a tendon imparts even less flavor than like a bone?
Right, the gid,
like
if you cook with the gid, it's mutter really, because the gid gives no flavor. And we said you could eat up until the gid, the Gemara said, but just don't eat the gid. But the gid, but you, it doesn't give any flavor. What are you gonna say? Bones are even more are what are less than the gid? And he's saying no, they shouldn't be. Am I saying that right?
But like, yeah, they shouldn't be considered even.
No, the other way around.
We shouldn't think bones are more noten tam. We shouldn't think that they're more noten tam than a gid, because like we have this assumption that like
right that the
non-bone things should be more flavorful than bones.
As he's trying to say that bones give flavor and should create Issur, but they shouldn't really, because the gidim don't, and bones don't give more flavor than gidim. Okay.
ואף אגב תטען בפרק ב' של התרומות, עצמות קודשים בזמן שהן מכונסין אסורים, האמרינן עליו בירושלמי בראשי כנפים וחסחוסין היא מצמיתים. Okay, and so like there's another thing that might seem to imply that bones are like considered kind of like meat, that they have this status, like this Issur status, whatever. What does it mean exactly? Like that the kodshim bones are Issur when they're collected. What is this scenario?
I actually did not look into it, so
okay,
I don't know.
Not so important, but like whatever, they can have this status, but it specifies in the Yerushalmi that that's with like the like wingtips and the kind of like the gristle bits, basically, I think of what the chaschusin were. That like this isn't like the stam dry bone stuff. It's kind of more like gristle, which wouldn't support the idea that stam bones have this kind of status.
In other words, these bones are, they can give flavor.
Yes, but he's saying it's like dafka, that like you might have said that this bit of the Yerushalmi supports the idea that bones do give flavor in general. But he's like, they specify there that it's dafka, that knafim v'chaschusin, which is like more kind of these particular things that are sort of more meaty-ish, that aren't really like mamish, like stam bones.
Wait,
and so you can't use this to prove that stam bones are like netamim.
Okay, continue. I want to get to the next part.
ועצמות נותר תטעונין שריפה בפרק כיצד סולין, היינו אותן שיש בהן מוח, לכך נראה דהה דלף נזרה בשאלה, ומשאר בעצמות, סימנה בעלמהו ואסמכתהי כתאמרינן בשמעתין, צמים במינם מדאורייתא ורובה ביtul. It's like whatever. He also brings in this idea, which comes into play later, about like when there's moach inside of bones, that like we count that. And then he's like, basically we can't resolve this well with our bavli. And so what I'm gonna say is that like this isn't actually like our derivation of like shishi.
So wait,
like,
so where do we come out in the halacha then by this point?
Like presumably with the idea, like here he seems to
which Gemara is he throwing out? The Yerushalmi or the Bavli?
The Bavli.
So what's the halacha in the Yerushalmi?
The halacha in the Yerushalmi would be certainly that bones of heter combine with heter, and seemingly bones of Issur either don't count or combine with heter. Right.
In other words, so presumably he's taking the Yerushalmi all the way. Presumably, he got rid of the Bavli. He said, it's just an asmakta. It's just because after all, what's his proof? Because after all, baruva bitul, like we said at the beginning of this year. So really, we'll just say like Rav Huna, all that the atzamot of Issur join with the heter. And what about this point that he says there's lachluchit? So you have to say, what do you mean? But there is flavor. So you have to say there isn't much flavor, not enough to create Issur. Okay, now let's just finish the rush.
ומיהו חתיכה של נבלה שנתבשלה ואחר כך נפל לקדרה, עצמות שבה מצטרפים לאסור, כשבולעים הם טעם הנבלה. He's like, when we were talking before, we were talking about a case where like these bones weren't cooked together with the Issur. However, when they're cooked together with the Issur, we really do think that like the meat imparts flavor to those bones, and so they combine with the meat like l'Issur. מידי תהווה הקדרה שבשל בבשר ולא יבשל בחלב, על זה פרקי סימן למד, ואפילו נתבשלה תחילה אותה חתיכה של נבלה בפני עצמה.
Avodah Zarah Parak Hey.
There we go.
Siman Lamed Vav is himself. He's referring to himself, I think. But I'm not sure, but I think he's referring to himself. There's Simanim in the Rosh. So he's saying, my Siman Lamed Vav.
מה סימן there? ואפילו נתבשלה תחילה אותה חתיכה של נבלה בפני עצמה בקדרה שחזרה ונפלה בקדרה של heter. אף על גב משארים כל הבשר שבה, ולסגי בהכי אם לא יישאר גם העצמות. So you see this explicit case where we have like a piece of nivela being like cooked and we need to bitul it, and it says like he explained there. I'm assuming this is what he explained there, and that's not in the Gemara itself explicitly. That like you do need to also measure with the atzamot. Shema basar nivela mitmaet bishulo v'nivla tam b'atzamot. Ze katav Rabbi Shimshon b'firish v'mishnayot mesechet Truma. So, right, he's saying like we're concerned about like in the process of cooking this, some of the like mamashut, some of the substance of like was like by the bones. So we need to measure all of the meat bones when they've been cooked together.
All right, so what is the reason for that? Why do you count all of the meat bones? Is it because of Hanan or because of something else?
Doesn't seem like Hanan. I mean, like the way he's certainly not like using that kind of language here. Like it seems to be implying that like it's dafka, this idea that like because some like substance, some of the amount that we would have measured against this like nevela ticha may have been like absorbed by those bones. Like we wouldn't be measuring shishim against the entirety of what that initial Issur is if we don't include the bones.
Right, and he compares it to a pot, because a pot, we generally don't say Hanan in a pot, but we would say that it absorbs flavor. Okay, so it comes out, now this, by the way, this second thing we read, where is that in the Shulchan Aruch, for those of you who saw the Shulchan Aruch? This second part here.
And Seif Bet.
That is Sif Bet, exactly. That is basically Sif Bet. And Sif Aleph is basically this. In other words, is basically Rav Huna. Sif Aleph is basically Rav Huna, the throwing out of the bavli and the accepting of the Yerushalmi as the source of the halacha, that bones of Issur count. Now, we haven't really given an explanation for why we're doing this. I sort of threw out maybe it's not food. The Rosh, if anything, made matters worse, because he said, well, bones do give a flavor. And yet he poskined that they don't give a flavor. In other words, ultimately, he poskined that they're not, that they join with the heter. So the Issur bones join with the heter. So we're left still wondering why this is the halacha, even though we have some sources for it. So on that note, we'll break and we'll pick up with the pre-Chadash in 5 minutes. You can ask questions if you have a question. We're digging deep into this question of bones. And I think, because we're going to see, there's a lot of contrasts. We're going to see that different people had different views of this, and I think it's interesting. Also, we'll get to see some people that we don't see so much, like the Pri Chadash. I'm a fan of the Pri Chadash. Every time I read something the Pri Chadash writes, I say, "Oh, that makes sense." Much more. I mean, usually I get convinced by everybody I read, but but the Pri Chadash in particular. And then I saw in Wikipedia why I like him, because it says the freedom with which Silva discussed halachic problems brought the ban of the rabbis of Cairo upon his Pri Chadash. In other words, he's born in Livorno, and he came made Aliyah to Jerusalem, and as a young man, he was a genius. He was like a rabbi at a very young age, but he wrote his halachic book. He just thought, he didn't care. He's kind of like the opposite. The school of thought of like the Beit Yosef and Rav Ovadia Yosef are very similar in that they both quote people. Well, everybody says this, so that must be the halacha. The Pri Chadash is, no, I just looking at the halacha, and it's got to make sense. And he's sort of on his own. And therefore, I can see why he got put in Cherem. But he also makes a lot of sense. And he basically questions the premise of this law that we've just been discussing. The Rosh just did the math of the law without ever really getting into what makes sense to him. In fact, when he did say what made sense to him, he said it makes sense to him that bones have blach luchit.
Where does that leave the Pri Chadash for contemporary poskim for using him?
Well, a lot of people quote him. He is very well respected, even though it was banned. Yes, he is extremely well respected. If that's what you're asking, he's quoted. He has chumras. He's not always. I'm not saying he's lenient. He has chumras. He's the one that we're going to see later in the year. That I consider famous, but of course, what I think is famous is what I think is not necessarily actually famous. But what he famously says is that Kli Sheni cooks if it's hot enough, and Kli Shlishi cooks, and Kli Revi cooks. Don't talk to me about Kalim. If it's hot and it cooks, it cooks. That's a chumrah of his, which is not really brought halacha at all, but makes a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense. So let's read. So, who wants to read? Maybe Noam, you want to read a little of my friend the Pri Chadash.
Sure.
I have a long piece here. Wait a second. Before you start, I have a long piece here. So it's 7, right? Before you start it, you don't have to translate everything because I want to go quickly.
Okay. But the Chazon Ish takes up the Pri Chadash and says the same thing about the Kalim, right?
What do you mean about?
It's about temperature.
Yeah. There are people. Yes. There are people that other people also quote him. Yeah, he's brought la halacha actually, but I mean, certainly the Sfardim do not hold like that, and Rav Moshe doesn't hold like that, right? But yes, it's that's why I say so. It is famous. It's famous among the people who read poskim. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Atzmod ha'Issur chulei. Hach dina lo itparesh lan mishum ditmia li miman nafshech imasmo yesh bahem shum lach luchlit. Vayedei habishul niflat lachutz. Eich atzmod ha'Issur mitzarfin levatel ha'Issur. Adarabba. Hayalanu latrich shishim nagmi neged atzmod ha'Issur.
Stop. So he says, first of all, his question is exactly what I said. It's lo it pareshlan doesn't make any sense. V'teimeli, it doesn't make sense. He is questioning the premise of this law. He's just saying, it doesn't make sense. And he says, either you tell me that they don't give a flavor, in which case, which was the side that he said now? If they do palut lechutz, then they should be adding to the Issur. And now he's going to say the other side. V'im
hasmo leipahu shum lachluchit afilu atzmod de heter lo havale litzrofinhu lebatel ha'Issur deha lo paltamidi lebatule l'Issur.
Right. He's saying they wouldn't. If they don't give out anything, then they should be completely neutral, and even the heter ones shouldn't help us, because if I throw in, I'll give you. If I throw in, think about it like this: if I throw into my pot, there's a book called Rock Soup, I don't know, or Stone Soup. If I throw in a stone into my pot, does that help me? In other words, let's say I happen to already have it. Obviously, I shouldn't put it in, but I had a stone in my pot, and then tray fell in. Do I count the stone? In other words, if a bone is like stone, it doesn't pull at anything, it doesn't add to the flavor, it doesn't do battle with the in the words of the Brisker Rav, it doesn't do battle with the Issur. So why should it help at all? The key tamer. Then there's so too with the bones. If the bones don't give a flavor, then they shouldn't help at all in either side.
Including the heter. Including the
heter, right?
וכי תימא שהאיסור מתבטל לפי שמתחלק ומתפשט הטעמו לעצמות, לכל מה שיש בקדרה, והרי נתבטל טעמו בשישים, הלכה, שהרי מה שנבלע ונכנס בתוך עצמות, בסתמה נכנס ונתפשט לשם לערך האיסור עם ההיתר.
So explain me that.
Right.
And,
so,
and I particularly, it's good that I called you because I discussed this by email with you. This is what
well, right. You were giving in the context of the pot. This is the context of the bone.
Yes, right. But this is what I meant.
Pot, right?
This is actually, I think, what I meant.
Oh, great. So I'm glad because I couldn't
find
it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. So, and if you say that the Issur helps to helps to be nullified.
Wait,
right?
let me just give a context. He's saying, well, wait a second. Maybe that rock in the pot or these bones, even if they don't give flavor, maybe they do help in absorbing the Issur because they do absorb Issur. After all, they do absorb Issur. Why shouldn't they help in the bitul, even if they don't have any flavor? And he's going to reject that. And why does he reject that? The last line.
Well, the last line is that because in the same way that they in the same way that they absorb or then exude out the Issur, they also do that with the heter. Or I should say not
exude out, exude in.
Exude in. It should say in the opposite way. In the same way that they exude in the heter, they also exude in the Issur. So you can't have it both ways.
Yeah, what he's saying is like this. It's true that some of the Issur goes into the stone. Let's think of the stone, because that's he's saying essentially the bones are like stone. If you're going to tell me that they're not like stones, then the Issur ones should make Issur. And if you're going to tell me they don't make Issur, then they must be like stones. Well, stones absorb, it's true, they absorb the Issur. But guess what? They also absorb the heter in the same ratio. In other words, if the ratio was 1:40 in the pot, well, 1:40 will go into the stone. So the stones have no net effect on the tarovet because they absorb the Issur, true, but they also absorb the heter. They take away some of the heter time. So they have no effect. Sounds very good. Now, with your permission, open the box. Just I want to interrupt here for a second because I just like to show that people look at the same thing in very logical ways and say the opposite things. Let's see the Bach on this exact thing. So I'll tell you where it is. First of all, the Bach is in the Tour Siman Sadi. And I didn't send this to you, but I did ask you to learn it. The truth is very important. The whole Bach there, the first Bach, long one, is very important. It brings you the Or Zarua, which is on my charts that I wanted you to look at. I'll send out my chart after Shir. Now, where is this Bach? I'm just looking for it now. Yeah. So, where is it? It's the Bach starts. The first Bach Aleph has like two sections. The first one starts Chaticha Nevela, and then in the middle, in mine, it's like Mudgash Yesh Lach Shot. And then if you turn the page, it's sort of like pretty much exactly in the middle of the Yesh Lach Shot. He quotes Perish Haran, and you see that you have a parenthesis. There's a parenthesis, Lamed Dalet, where he gives the Ma'areh Makomo. And he says Perish Haran, Al Shem Rashi, De Bekedera Atzma, Hainu Becharse V'chule. And then he says Alma. Tell me if you got that. You got it? You got it? Lexi? You got it? Okay, so I'll just read that. He says, I'm just jumping in the middle here of everything. But Alma Sha'af Acharsin Nechshavin Litzaref Otam Kedei Levatel Issur. You see that the Cheres does join to help Mevatel Issur. V'lav kushya he, doesn't matter what he's referring to. The Levatel Issur Vaday Mitzaref. Why? It's for sure the pot is mitzaref. Why? Shaharei bitul hu lefi sha'isur mitpashet b'kol hatichot b'kol ma sheyesh b'kedera she'ein bo kedei liten tam. Im kein gam guf acheres mitpashet. I don't know why it says mitpashet. It should say like mitpashet elav. But also guf acheres, it's mitpashet into. It goes into shaharei gam acheres hu bolei ksata isur. So he says the exact same case, and he says the opposite thing, right? He says that Issur goes in. Of course, you count the cheres, the wall of the pot, because the wall of the pot absorbs some of the Issur, so it's also one of the things. And he doesn't go with the svara of the Pri Chadash, who he couldn't have because he was before the Pri Chadash, but he didn't know about the opposite idea. That no, why say that? Say both of them go in at the same ratio. Now, the Bach is also an outlying, but now, can anybody give me a compromise opinion? In other words, give me a time when you would count the kli of the pot and when you wouldn't count the kli of the pot. In other words, when would you count the wall of the pot?
When you're measuring how much was in the pot only after it's already been absorbed into the pot. Something like that?
Yeah, something like that. So somebody else say it again?
It says that either, if not in the Bach, then somewhere else, when it's like the Issur isn't like ba'ayin, like in the pot anymore, but it's like some chelev that's already like nimuach in the pot. It's like, yeah, you use the rest of the pot to like mevatel it. Like that's where it's spreading.
Right. Well, he makes even a stronger case. I know what you're referring to. I think it is the Bach, and he says.
Well, you said compromise.
Yeah. No, that's right. But there he says where the Issur isn't there at all. The Issur is just in the walls of the pot, and now I take the pot and use it a second time. But there's also another possible compromise, which is that we'll count the walls of the pot when they were balua heter from a previous cooking, and we're really just counting the balua in the pot, and we're not actually counting the fact that the pot. And why is that a distinct case? Because the balua in the pot exudes flavor. In other words, it helps us in the battle of the two flavors because the pot has flavor in it. Unlike the bone, which has no flavor in it, according to this.
Has to be our presumption.
According to the presumption of the question, we said either it does have flavor or it doesn't have flavor. Of course, what's the other answer? Of course, what's the other third choice? There's a third choice that is that the bones have a little bit of flavor. And we're going to see that. In other words, he says, either the bones have no flavor or do have flavor. And if they do have flavor, then they should help with the Issur and the heter. And if they don't have flavor, they should be irrelevant. Of course, there's a middle ground because they have a little bit of flavor. Just enough. And I think we'll see that. So let's go on. So anyway, I just wanted you to see that what seems so apparent and clear when the Pri Chadash says it, then you see the Bach says something different. And you get convinced either way. You read the Bach and you say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Where were we? We finished the first paragraph of Pri Chadash. So read on.
Al derech mashal haresha nafal kazait chalev v'kedera sheyesh ba kishloshim kezeitin shel basar u'chshoshim kezeitin shel atzmot. Tema al atzmach eich yeh mitbatel tam hachelev b'shloshim. V'im kachatzi zayt shel chalev nifla b'atzmot misdama nivla'in la'arech ze chamesh asra zeitim shel mohel plitat habasar, v'chen chaser hen heter, v'im ken sof Issur Bameni Batel.
So can you explain that?
He's giving an actual case here.
Yeah. So what's the case?
Where you have a little bit of one kazayit of challah that falls into a joint pot that already has shoshim zaytim of basar and shoshim zaytim of bones. So that's equal to 60. But then he says, but how is it supposed to be? How is the little challah supposed to be batel in the 30 zaytim of meat?
Of meat, because the meat is the only thing that's contributing flavor.
Right, and if you say that half of the chalev is absorbed into the bones, right? Then you're down to 15 zaytim of those bones, right?
No. He's saying maybe half of the chalev goes into the bones, and therefore half of it only is left, and therefore it is batal b'shishim, because half of the chalev got absorbed into the bones, because they're like the Bach is saying, right? That it can go in. He says, and then he doesn't like that.
Well, he doesn't like it for the same reason.
Because he's the same what he just said before. Mistama nivla le'erech zecha meishesrei zaytim shel mohel upletat abasar hen chaser. As he's saying, also some of the meat will, of the 30 meat, some of its flavor, not its substance, but some of its flavor will go in to the bones also, and will be removed from the calculation. So if we're going to remove some of the chalev, we're also going to remove some of the, in other words, he's basically saying the same thing, that the bones, if they're absorbing from both sources, from the Issur and the heter, and therefore have no net effect. Saying the moa will go into the bones and go out of the equation. So he says it's impossible. So tama Issur, but maybe patel. So there's no, he's thinking, that's what I wrote in the comments, he's worried about tam, not about the actual substance. In other words, in order to mevatel, why is it that a dry wall of a pot with no flavor in it can't help? Because in order to mevatel, you need a tam against the Issur tam. If it's just providing a place to go, that's not enough. It needs to provide a positive tam to mevatel, to counter the Issur tam. And since bones don't do that, they're useless.
That might be the machloka he's really having with the Bach. They didn't actually, is that the Bach, he doesn't really think it's about tam. It's about forces, right? But it's not about, you need a tam against a tam. You just need substance there.
Right, exactly.
Right. Like, it's this idea of, am I diminishing flavor so long as it just, is diffused throughout greater mass? Or is flavor only diminished if there is some other kind of noticeable flavor working against it?
It's an essential point. This is really a hakira. This is a major point. What creates bitul? Is it the force of another flavor going against my flavor, or is it just a substance? The truth is, I would tend, from my learning, I would tend to agree with the Pri Chadash that it's flavor. Like I said, I think Rav Chaim also talks about this. You need a flavor against a flavor. I would, if I had to choose sides, then I would choose that side. All right, let's go. Wait. Let me read a little bit. Va'ahada amrina b'perek gira nashe de shmainan b'kedera atzma b'katur tosfos. So this is this tosfos that I gave you at the beginning. This is this tosfos. So the tosfos says, I didn't give you the Gemara to learn, but let's just look at the tosfos. V'teima im shiur ovi hakedera kechamishim zeiti, because the Gemara seems to say that you do count the pot. And Tosfos says, well, that's crazy to count the pot. And he brings a case like this. He says, what if I had a very thick, heavy cast iron pot, which, had a ton of metal in it, and I put in it just 10 cups of water. And then I poured in by mistake a cup of treif. Now, but the pot, it had 50 cups of steel in it. In other words, the pot itself was 50 cups of steel. And now I pour into it 10 more cups of water. So I have water and steel of 60. And now 1 unit of treif falls in. Nobody would say that it's batel, because it's really 1 in 10. Everybody knows it's really 1 in 10. or one, yeah, it's 1 against 10. So clearly the wall can't work. And then he gives an answer that the Gemara there was talking. Let's see his answer. He says, just skipping, Venira the Faresh, where I underline. Venira the Faresh, let me give you a share screen. So he says, Venira the Faresh over here. Venira the Faresh, Dahacha Mayri Kagom de Lete Issur Be'ain. This is what you guys were talking about. This is what Lexi was mentioning. That Leke Issur Be'aina, that the Tosfos says. Maybe it's talking about a case where there's no Issur actually here. De Nivla Baba Kadeira Kazayit Chalev, that the pot absorbed a Kazayit of Chalev, but the Chalev is gone now. Yes, earlier in the morning it absorbed a Kazayit of Chalev. Vehi Haita Kvar Balua Meheter. And the pot was already even earlier in the morning, had been cooked oatmeal in it. So it had kosher oatmeal flavor and treif nevela in the walls. V'acharka chazar ubishel, and now they do a third cooking. V'acharka chazar ubishel heter, and now you come and cook heter in it. The misharin b'kedei ra'atzma levatel ha'issur shenivlaba. So when we're worried about that kazayit of chalev in the walls of the pot, we can add into it the 6 kazetim or whatever they are of oatmeal, that flavor that's in the walls. So that's what I was saying. That's kind of the compromise opinion. That flavor in the walls can go against, well, here he's even more cautious. It can go against treif flavor in the walls and can add to the food. So you have 6 oatmeal, 1 chalev, and as long as you have 54 food, then you're okay, and the 1 kazayit of chalev in the wall won't be a problem. So he says, but their terutz doesn't help us here. But you see from what he says, their terutz, because we're not talking about a case like that. We're talking about a case of actual bones, not flavor of bones. Vehu karov l'mashe kashti, and it's very similar to my kash. In other words, you see that the Tosfos understands the question the same way that I do, and not the way the Bach does. Basically, is what he's saying. That the Tosfos says the walls of the pot don't help just because they absorb. You need to have tam there. She'im shi'ur hatzamot hu ka'arba kazetim, ka'arbaim kazetim. If you have 40 zaitim of bones, ukaz ve'ech yitbatel tam ha'issur b'shir esrim. In other words, let's say that the bones were a huge proportion. Let's say they were 60. Sorry, let's say there were 40 and you only had 20 heter, then obviously 1 Issur is really going against the 20 and not against the whole 60. V'shema yesh lomar, and here he proposes a solution. De lo mekelin u'misharin b'hai ela b'min b'mino. De mid'oraita b'robata. Here is a great opinion, which he says, actually, you know what? All this halacha is only talking about min b'mino. Because min b'mino is batel b'shishim. B'rov, sorry. B'shishim is only the Rabbanan. So since this is really batel b'rov, we can count all kinds of crazy things to get our 60. Kind of like what we said last week, that we're just interested in getting shishim. Of course, the proviso that he doesn't say, but that is implied is, but you still have to have rov heter. You still have to have at least rov heter. But all of these halachas only talk about min b'mino. Well, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because min b'mino is batel b'rov, so okay, count some bones. The only problem, yeah, go ahead. Somebody had a comment? That's a great teretz. We're only talking, reread everything. It's all talking about min b'mino. By the way, that was what Rav Huna says, truma and truma, right? He says, he was talking about the klipa of the peel, going against, the peel of the wheat going against the other wheat. In other words, it was all the same thing. V'kevan de shiur shishim be'havi midrabanan, hemekelu l'shirei b'achi, and therefore they were lenient. Aval b'min b'sheino mino, dekayim elan tam kiker d'oraita, because we hold tam kiker d'oraita. And what does tam kiker d'oraita mean? Means that shishim is d'oraita. Ein l'shayer afilu atzamot heter. Even the heter bones you can't count. She'ein behen shum lachluchit levatel issur da'ha'ike tama the issur v'tama lo batel. He's worried about tam. Tam is not batel. The bones aren't contributing a new flavor, and therefore they don't count. Ela d'tzarich ian amai lo bir ze'aposkim. But why didn't anybody say this? That's what he's saying. Now the priest is saying, it has to be what I'm saying is right. Nobody ever said it before me, and yet it's got to be the halacha. So it's sort of funny the way he says it. I don't know. It's a kasha on them, but is that really? It's a kasha on them. Why didn't they say it? But it's really he understands it. It's a kasha on himself. He understands. It's a problematic because if nobody said this, nobody explicitly said we're talking about mino only, then his teretz isn't so good. And then he writes, after many days, matzati. Basically, he says that he found that Rabbeinu Yerucham and it's brought actually the Berech Habayis agrees with him. And I'll skip.
Well, that's pretty strong.
Yeah, that's pretty strong.
Well, the Berech Habayis doesn't agree with him. The Berech
Habayis brings right. The Berech Habayis, you're right. Yes.
Right.
In the end, the Berech Habayis doesn't agree with him, but he brings the Rabbeinu Yerucham. You see, the Rabbeinu Yerucham agrees with him. B'shem Rabbi Avraham ben Asmael. So he brings that. And he says, Umikol makom, skipping to the dark lines. Umikol makom, I'll go down here.
You scroll down? Thanks.
Yeah. Umikol makom, halakha l'maaseh naktinen la'achmir kisvara harav Rabbeinu Avraham b'kenikar. In other words, he's saying, halakha l'maaseh, don't rely on bones except if it's min be'eno mino. If it's min be'mino. If it's min be'eno mino, he's not allowing. He's not allowing you to add the bones. So he's sticking with his halacha. V'da, that's a motarakot, that's a ra'ah, v'aran, d'mitztarfim l'Issur, mipnei ha'moach shebehen. So soft bones do join, u'machmat rachutam, because they're soft, v'yotzei lachluchit man, and they do have some flavor, v'ken dat achron. Okay, so that's the Pri Chadash. The Shulchan Aruch, as you saw in your own studies, paskins not like the Pri Chadash. He doesn't say it's only by mina mina. He sticks with the rush. The halacha is bones join. The Issur bones joined with heter. And only the Ramah says, but we don't do that. As the Ramah always likes to do, or not always, sometimes does. He says, right, but we're not going to see that today. But let's go on. I want to see now the Kreti Pleti. Now the Kreti Pleti, you hear of his name, it's famous, but you probably never read it because it's not very commonly approached. Partially, I would suggest, although on my own, that it's because it's not the language is not as beautiful. What we just read in the Pri Chadash was clear and beautiful and well argued. The Kreti Pleti sometimes is like I even cut it. I don't know if you noticed. I wrote Pilpul Aroch. I wrote there. It's like he has like these very long Pilpulim, and in the end people want something short, and they say that whatever. So he's not read as much, but here we have an opportunity to look at it. So
it also might be because he was a closet Sabbatian.
I don't think so.
Yaakov Emden's side right there. That was pretty impressive.
I'm fully, if you look at the historical record, besides for Yaakov Emden, it seems pretty clear.
What, that he was?
That he was a post, when after Shabtai Tzvi, he was still a supporter of that movement.
So you're saying Yaakov Emden was right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't think that's why, but I think that maybe. But he's famous. He's still very famous. So let's look at it. So he quotes the Rabbeinu Yerucham that the Pri Chadash was so excited about. So he says, Rabbeinu Yerucham b'shem ha'gaon hevi Dahani milim b'mino the davar Torah bata barov. Okay. Beruva bata. Ava b'sheino mino lo. V'arav bal pri chadash. Oh, he quotes our pri chadash. Harav bal pri chadash hechzich al yado. Kaven de leit lahu pleta migufa. Damya l'kedera. It's just like a kedera damrinan. Atu a terabala. Atu a bear.
Could you either take us off screen share or scroll down?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks for reminding me.
Thank you.
Okay. So he says, Atu a terabala velo Issur. What? You're going to tell me, it absorbs both. Velama yitzaref levatel. Why would it help to mevatel the pot? That's just what we just read. Velama lo yitzaref guf acheres b'kedera. V'lechen ein ze el b'min b'mino dehu rak shiur d'Rabbanan. Okay. V'arav bedek abayit katav. So now this is, the Beit Yosef, Katav she'ein nira ken dat harosh or harash. I don't know. V'harosh. Sorry, I don't know what the Harash is.
That's the guy who the Rosh
quoted. Rav Shimon.
Rav Shimshon.
Rav Shimshon. That's Rav Shimshon. And Harosh. V'nachon ito. And I agree with the Rosh. The milvad ho'il v'stamu lo chelku. First of all, they did just like the Pri Chadash said. Nobody pointed that there's any difference between minu and eno minu. Va'af gam daha hikshu b'mad ha'amrinan b'gemara l'man da'amar b'samich atzamot b'hadei atzamot misharinan mashma de'ein atzamot b'starif levatel ha'Issur. L'man da'amar b'shishim. According to the opinion that holds shishim, atzamot b'hadei atzamot misharinan. You do the bones against the bones. Mashma de'ein atzamot b'starif levatel ha'Issur. I don't know why he says that exactly, but the feet, the not mevatel, they're joining on both sides, I thought. But anyway, for the feet that Rabbeinu Yerucha ma kushia baha. All right, I want to skip this. Right, you're just getting into a little complicated logical point. Va'adarabba, skip down to the next sentence here. Va'adarabba here. Va'adarabba, the feet devarav shel pri chadash anal. Afilu atzamot heter be'eno mino ein roi litzaref. According to the Pri Chadash, it should come out that you should ignore the bones also of the heter, the havik gedera. Right? You should ignore all the bones. V'lechen nira ki belav hachi tamhu ech amrinan b'gemara. I'm going to skip this. We can't read it all. But let's skip to where. Let's skip to where I made it bold. V'lechen be'emet tam kalush yesh behen. So here's what I was saying about this middle position. In other words, the Pri Chadash said it's made a dichotomy, and right, either their bones give flavor or they don't give flavor. And so the Pleti says that's a false dichotomy. There is a middle ground. There is some kind of minimal flavor in the bones. And here actually he's quite right. If you cook bones in water for a long time, the water starts to taste like meat. Even if you take the moach out, even without moach, even just plain bones. Well, when they were saying, they had this argument about gidim, they weren't arguing about metziut, because if they were arguing about metziut, let them take a pot and cook some gidim and see if it has flavor. They wouldn't waste our time on something that they could easily check. They weren't arguing about metziut. Your mouth will taste it. What was really going on by the gidim? Tam kalush it behu. Everybody agrees there's a tam kalush in gidim. And they were arguing, what is our attitude towards that tam? Is it that it's tam or that it's not tam? But it for sure there's a tam kalush there. How much significance do we give to that tam? So he says the same thing here. So we can say the same thing by the atzamot. For sure, atzamot have a pleta. Rak hu tam kalush. It's just a weak flavor. Velo tam ke'ikr. And it's not categorized as tam ke'ikr. In other words, it doesn't have that. It's not tam ke'ikr. It's therefore it's not asr. Velo tam ke'ikr hazeh asra Torah. Sorry. This tam is not asr according to the Torah. Aval al kol panim kevan sheyesh tam, but there is a tam there. Ye kalush tachlita kalush. Even if it's super kalush. Al kol panim misayir levatel tam Issur. It will help to mevatel this. And it's not a case of just a rock in your soup. It's a bone in your soup. It has a little flavor, and that is enough to help counter. It puts in a new flavor into the pot. So he agrees with the Bri Chadash that you need to have flavor going into the pot. But a weak bone flavor is also called a flavor. Velo damya l'kedera, and it's not comparable to the wall of a pot. The late the cloud that has no flavor. V'im ken mushab kushis Bri Chadash al Nachum. And then I wrote pilpul aroch, and and then he goes on. V'adin din emet v'duk. Bein be'eno mino lo kasha midi umiyashav kol kushios Bri Chadash v'arash. So there you have it. He says no. The halacha is like the Shulchan Aruch. It's a tam kalush, and therefore it does do battle with the Issur, but it's not enough to be Issur. So therefore, even the atzamot as Issur have that tam kalush, which can do battle against the Issur, even in Eino Mino. So now we're back to square one. I mean, everything is good. Let's look at the Chavot. Now, the Chavot is also a very serious opinion, quoted all the time by the poskim. But actually, I want to skip the Chavot because the Chavot is talking about a different topic. I should have had 9 and 10 switched. So let's look at 10 first. And 10, I did you a big favor here because this is a very long tshuva, and I just quoted you one sentence of it. But this is Yebia Omer of Yosef, and he says, and this is going to be a practical application now, because by the way, I would say that okay, fine. Lefi dat maran hashulchan aruch shekibalnu harotav afilu atzamot rakot ein behen shum Issur. In other words, he didn't specify weak, little bones, thin bones, fresh bones, old bones, all bones. There's no ein behen shum Issur afilu midrabanan, and that's why they join into the. That's why the Issur bones join to the heter, because they're actually. In other words, what he's actually saying, if you think about it, is. I guess they're not. I don't know. Are they food or are they not food? Are they food? In other words, maybe they're food, but they're not Issur food. Bones maybe are food, but they're prohibited. Sort of similar to what we say, like by nevela. Although this may not. There's this famous. We learned that it says by nevela, masher ra'ui lager. Only what's ra'ui lager, and as it says nevela, you should give to the ger. It says in the Torah. It says in the Torah, throw the nevela to the ger. So we learn from that only what's called nevela is only what is ra'ui to a ger.
And he meant this for psak halacha.
Yes, psak halacha, but the question
it wasn't a shita. This should be psak halacha.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's if it's not, that's where we get tam l'gam. If it's not, if it's for sure. But if it's not ra'ui lager. Right. So maybe bones you wouldn't give to a ger. In other words, a ger meaning, by the way, ger means a ger toshav, a non-Jew, not a convert, a non-Jew who lives among you. So you wouldn't give him bones. So bones maybe are food, but they're kind of like this gum food. So therefore, you don't have to get onto what you don't have to start up with what the pleti says. They give a little flavor. Doesn't matter, even if they're weak, even if they're soft bones, they give a ton of flavor. They're not Issur food. They're food, but they're not Issur. That's the way the Rav Ovadia is learning the Shulchan Aruch, because he doesn't distinguish any bones. So it's apparently they're food. They're just not Issur food, and therefore even the Issur bones can help. And then he says, Kimuvar Rashba Baram, which you didn't see. The inkain had gelatin. Shenasu me'atzamot shel nevelot v'treifot v'tmeot ein behen chashash klal. They're mutter. All gelatin would therefore logically be mutter, because bones, like I said, I'm trying to explain. I didn't give in these words you don't see what he's thinking. But I think what he's thinking is, like I said, that it's food. So just don't tell me, so therefore, but it's just not Issur food. So therefore, if you make something from it that's you want to eat, b'vakasha. Now he later in this tshuva goes on to say that when they make gelatin, they don't just use bones; they also use the skins and they use other parts. So therefore, this is only a theoretical heter. In reality, unless you would know that that only bones were used, you couldn't use gelatin. So in the end, he doesn't really give a heter. But we do see from this his understanding of the Shulchan Aruch, that when he gives a blanket heter, he's understanding it as I'm adding this thing that it's like the Valen Treifa. But
I have a question. What's the difference between atzamot rachot or atzamot rachim and atzamot sheyesh behen moach?
I spent a half an hour on deciding whether it's atzamot rachot or rachim, but it's atzamot rachot. It's atzamot rachot.
What's a soft bone that's not a bone that has marrow in it?
Yeah, I think there's two different. You're right. Every soft bone has marrow in it, right? I mean, maybe I don't know.
The Shulchan Aruch explicitly says the marrow has to be counted for the Issur.
Well, you could take the marrow out.
So if I take marrow out of my bones, they stay soft. I don't know anything about this. I'm a vegetarian. I don't know bones.
Yes. First of all, a big bone, I sometimes put bones in my cholent, and a big bone, the marrow, as you put a bone in, you think it's solid bone. And then when you come back after a day of cooking, there's a hole in the middle. And the marrow has dissolved. It looked like it was bone. So you can actually remove the marrow is something else. You could remove it. Yeah, it's a good question. It's a Metziut question. Exactly. You're right. I was also bothered by that. Why are they talking about, if it's soft bones, then it should be, you're right. Soft bones have marrow in them always, don't they? So, but then even so, if you would drop it in, you would only count the marrow as the Issur and not the bone. The whole bone wouldn't be Issur. The bone part of the bone would be still heter, and only the marrow part would be Issur. And then we get into the question of Issur Davu, which is the question of the Bach. The Bach asks, but wait a second, why isn't this Issur Davu? Why doesn't we say that the meat is next to the bone and then prohibits the bone because it first, and as the bone becomes Hanan, why don't we say Hanan? The bone becomes Hanan, and then I need against the bone. Now, the Shulchan Aruch, of course, does not hold Hanan in things that are not milk and meat. And this is not milk and meat, so there's no Hanan for him. But we as Ashkenazim, says the Bach, should say Hanan, and the bone should become Issur. So, how does the Taz and the Shach answer that question?
Can I ask a question about the bitul before we move on?
Yeah.
Is the language that he's using of I lost it, but Shekibalnu horotav, is that like to say like we don't need to worry about the any like arguments about whether or not this is true, like whether or not this makes sense, like the other ones we were looking at. We take his thing and therefore we draw conclusions from his conclusions. We don't have to worry about why or whether it makes sense.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't go that far to say we don't have to worry about it, but
Okay.
but we should. But he does accept the Shulchan Aruch kind of without question.
Right. Okay.
Where do we see that?
The very beginning. Lefidat
Maran v'Shulchan Aruch shekibalnu horotav. Yeah, right. They are accepted by the. That's what the Shulchan Aruch is. It was accepted by Klal Yisrael, and therefore it's binding.
Except not for
yeah. So wait. So can somebody? So yeah, you're right. I mean, he also will try to give you logic to it, and I think I just did. I just gave you a logic to it.
You also have to remember where he's coming from. This is the guy that will uphold the Shulchan Aruch no matter what, no matter and it doesn't matter. Like there might be a billion Achronim that say Shulchan Aruch wrong, but he'll try to synthesize those opinions and make it conform to what the Shulchan Aruch says. But at the end of the day, like Shulchan Aruch said it, Klal Yisrael accepted it.
Mm-hmm.
Rav Nachum, in terms of your question as to how to deal with the question of the Bach, what the Shach and the Taz say, it's connected to what we saw last week. That its bones are like pots, in that if we have a pot that can be kosher theoretically, like metal, we don't say chanan by it. So to bones that can theoretically be made permitted, we also don't say chanan by them.
Right.
Well, and it's specifically because.
Well, that's what I wrote here. Exactly. That's what I wrote here. It's Haggalah.
Even though it has no flavor, right? Like, so it's only this idea of like, which is weird though, because does he hold a Charlie Schot Mutar? Does the Ramah hold that?
No. I mean, that's a big question. What is it? How exactly? If Charlie Schot Mutar, no. That's what Hanan is. Hanan means that in Shar Issurim, it became Issur. Even if you took everything out, it's Issur.
I guess I'm just like a little like, I guess you can say it's different when we're talking about like these things that have no tam and like Haggalah versus like Eshar with like something you're eating. But like the idea of, bones are different because you could fix them and remove the Issur in it, like feels bizarre. A lot like Eshar Mutar to me. That distinction between that and the Kilei Cheres.
Well, that's the question. There's something concept called Haggalah ba'ochli. This is a question that was on my smicha test. Is there Haggalah ba'ochli? In other words, from this you see that's the difference. The ochli, you don't have Haggalah, and that bones you have Haggalah, and that's why he's saying. I mean, it's an essential point. He's saying that's why the Ramah says Chanan b'shar Issurim, because it's ochel. But when it's not ochel, he never says Chanan. There's no such thing as Chanan by things that are Haggalable. Now, Kli Cheres is not able to do Haggalah, and therefore by Kli Cheres he does say Chanan, even though it's not food. So therefore bones could be not food. A little bit different from the way I was explaining about Yosef. He's saying the bones are not food, but therefore, right? It's a little bit different from what Avad Yosef. I don't know if Avad Yosef could agree with this shach, because he's saying it's essentially not food, right? It's essentially not food. It's a pot. It's a bone. So it's like a bone pot, and you can do a gal on it. Therefore, there's no chanan. It's almost like, right? Unless you want to say that it is food, you can do a gal on food.
Like if you had a bone spoon, like an ivory spoon.
Yeah, that would be, but that wouldn't be food. This is, in other words, you can do Haggalah on a bone spoon, but but here we're doing Haggalah on bones. maybe it's different. Maybe it's food. Rav Ovadia Yosef, the way I explained it, seems to be saying that the bones are food, they're just mutter food. So maybe you can't do hagala on it. You can't do hagala on a piece of chicken. So we just have, let's just, all right, so that was that. We have 3 minutes. Let's just look at this Chavodat, which is really about Sif Bet, I think. I don't know if we have time for it, maybe. Right. So the Chavodat says that whole Sif Bet, the Chavodat says that whole Sif Bet is in the Shulchan Aruch. He says that you count it. He says you need it because we'll always need it because, in other words, when you cook the meat with the bone ahead of time, the Issur meat and the Issur bone ahead of time, we're going to say Hanan, because even though the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say Hanan, and therefore, even if you knew the original amount of meat, in other words, in Sif Bet, let me go like this. In Sif Bet, the Shulchan Aruch says that if you cook meat with bone, then you need to measure against the whole mixture because the bone absorbed some of the treif meat flavor, and now when this bone and meat that was Issur that you cooked falls into another pot, you have to go against the bone and the meat. In other words, the bone is only ignored or only counts towards the heter when it was raw, but when it was cooked previously, it now absorbed Issur flavor, and we have to count against it, all of it. Now, we said, well, wait a second, the Shulchan Aruch does not hold Hanan by things that are not milk and meat. So why is he saying it? So it's not because of Hanan. It's because, like Lexi said at the beginning of today's shir, that the meat was a certain size and it shrank. And so if we measure against the meat, we'll think we only have to measure against this, but really, when it shrank, some of the meat went into the bone. So some of that shrinkage is in the bone. So we have to assume that the whole bone is now got the shrinkage. So the Chavodat says, well, what if we knew the original size of the meat? If we knew the original size of the meat when it was raw was 1 kilo, and the bone was 1 kilo, and now we take it out and it's 1.5 kilos with the bone and the meat together, we know that we don't have to do more than 1 kilo because there's no Hanan here. In other words, the bone was 1 kilo and the meat was 1 kilo, and it shrank down, so the meat is now 0.5 kilo, and the bone is still 1 kilo. So if we don't know the original size, then we have to count against 1.5 kilos, because we don't know what the original size of the meat was. Maybe it was 1.5 kilos. But if we knew it was only 1 kilo, then we don't have to measure against what we have in front of us, where we can go by the more kula, the more lenient opinion, and say it was only 1 kilo of Issur at the beginning. He says, yes, that's what the Shulchan Aruch is saying. But we Ashkenazim would say, no, you'll always go by the 1.5 kilos, because bone becomes Hanan. In other words, there is Hanan in the bone. Even though maybe there's no Hanan in Kalim, but here, in other words, again, the bone is really food. Sort of similar, the Chavodat, sort of similar to what we said in the Pleti, that it is food, or the way I explained Rav Ovadia Yosef. It is food, it's just mutter food. But it's mutter food that was cooked with Issur, and it absorbed some of the Issur. So it's Hanan. So he says that in Sif Bet, we'll have to say that even if you knew the original size of the Issur, you'll still have to measure against the bones and the Issur as it is in front of you. The Sephardim would be able to measure against only the original size. That's the Chavodat. I hope that was interesting. I hope going through the...
It's class. A tour de force. It's terrific.
Yeah, going through those interesting opinions. So now I think we understand.
It's going to be good. It's going to be
Thank
great
you.
when everyone needs to summarize it. It's terrific.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, that's the other thing. I don't know. Well, maybe Joel will say Joel, you want to say something about summarizing?
Yeah, we need to set a schedule. Maybe I'll send out an email
Yeah.
because I think it'd be good to do like Nachum suggested like a 30-minute halacha summary. I was thinking like if people are fans of the Tiferet Yisrael's Hilchot HaGevurta that he has like the end of the Mishnah, like a little thing to summarize what the halacha is.
Right. I was thinking. I asked Joel if he wants to give like a 30-minute summary of what we do each week. If people are people interested in going to such a thing? Yeah. I mean, I think because we talk about a lot of deep ideas, arguments, but in the end, you want to know what the halacha is. So,
Great. That's great.
We'll send out an email, try to arrange a time.
Okay.
I could say I'd be interested. I'd be very surprised if I can find a half an hour available to do it, but if I can, I would love to.
Okay.
Could you send out a when to
Speaking
me
for
on
myself.
the Google group?
Oh, that's what I was going to do. So let's do it that way.
Okay. Is there anything else I want to say as the conclusion? Well, the conclusion is the halacha that we do count bones of Issur as for heter. Amazing as it may seem. Okay, but Joel will go into detail about that.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Beautiful evening.
That was
Thank
great.
you very much. Have a good night, everyone.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
You.